And okay, yeah, thank you, Mark, for coming on the show. So this is Mark Windows, and Mark runs windowsontheworld.net, and he has his own show every Wednesday live at 8 p.m. UK time, GMT, and the show covers the bigger picture on what's really going on behind the scenes. So to kick things off, Mark, please tell us about the upcoming events you have this weekend and how we can find out about them.
Yeah, we're doing some talks. We do talks which we call the bigger picture. They're the bigger picture of what's actually going on geopolitically,
Okay.
and basically what's happening, especially in the UK. This weekend on the 8th of February, we're at the Corner House, 1 Christchurch Street, East Frome, BA11 1QA, and that's 11 a.m. till 6 p.m. There's an Eventbrite bookings page at windowsontheworld.net, and on the 9th of February, we're at the Dartmouth Inn Totnes, and there's an Eventbrite bookings page for that. But please just turn up if you're in Frome or Totnes or even outside it and want to hear what's going on. It's a whole day of myself, Piers Corbyn and Sandy Adams, and we give you essential information which you will find useful as well as very interesting. And in fact, it's essential information for anyone who wants to stay in this country. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd just like to back that up. I mean, I went to see you in Glastonbury twice, and I was just blown away by all of this stuff that I didn't know. And I felt, wow, I felt so much more empowered because I never really knew what citizens' assemblies were about to start with. You know, I always thought the term was a bit strange, and then all about this Delphi technique. But then, of course, I experienced it myself firsthand. And yeah, when that happened, obviously I was able to call it out for what it was.
I started windowsontheworld.net quite a few years ago. I used to run a website called landofthefree.co.uk. We started looking at how the narrative of public opinion was being controlled locally, and this took us into looking at what was happening within local councils.
Okay.
And then we started looking at the bigger picture. So John's back now. So yeah, just tell him about the website, John.
I continue from there. There was a very interesting post that you put up on your website, Mark, called "The 5G Debate Hijacked by Globalists." And I interviewed Claire Edwards actually not long ago about this. But you were in fact the first person that I know who picked up on this back in October last year. And in that article, you point to a website called worldshift.earth. Could you tell us a little bit more about this?
Okay, so I think people might find this a bit confusing, but basically what it is, there's a template being rolled out, and it's a template that wants to control the public narrative. The public narrative is being controlled in a way that most people will understand. This is why I like to bring it back to local, globally through local implementation. And that's really what came out of this thing called Agenda 21, which is called sustainable development. Now, sustainable development is a mixture of environmentalism and development. Now that sounds good, doesn't it? But sustainable development can mean anything that the UN or a government want it to mean. And that was actually reiterated at their conference in this year, actually, no, last year. It was the enablers of global governance. Look at that on YouTube. And there's a World Global Governance Summit in Dubai last year. Now they have these every year, it's a UN thing. And it's been going on since 1987 when they set up the World Wilderness Conference, which one of these websites that you referred to, WorldShift, was actually promoting. Now, what's interesting about this is that you get these websites in a way that they want to control the whole narrative. So if you want to basically take over a protest group, so say something starts up, what you'd have to do is you control that protest by basically infiltrating it. Now, what they're doing with this, in a way, is they're owning the protest. So in other words, what happens is, so, okay, we're going to set up the World 5G Protest Day, but our real agenda is to bring everyone together into a new consciousness, a new world shift, a new paradigm. This is all the sort of language that's used, okay? Now, the point is about this, is it looks all great and fluffy on the surface, but what it's really about is controlling the narrative of public opinion. Because the idea of sustainable development and the global action plan, and in a way the climate change agenda, is all geared to smart cities and the rollout of what is becoming a technocratic system, then you have to make people believe in that system. So what you do is you give them their protest. I'll give you an example of this now, okay? Like Extinction Rebellion is a globalist-backed anti-globalist movement. And people go, what does that mean? It means that the policies, global policies, are going to be unpopular with certain people. You can't get these past everybody. So what you do is you give the protesters, the anti-globalists, their protest. Their protest is what you want to impose. So you get them basically lobbying your government for citizens' assemblies. Citizens' assemblies in this country are funded by Open Society George Soros. Why is our government going above the heads of the public and letting George Soros run involve.org.uk, citizens' assemblies, My Society? Have a look at what the citizens' assemblies are about. They're about controlling the narrative of public opinion. In other words, there's one choice, no choice. Your choice has already been decided. That's what these groups of people do. So the Club of Budapest, who set up, I believe, this website, came out of the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome put out a document in the year, I think it was, let's go back to the year 2000, when we had the document came out in the 90s called Limits to Growth. Limits to Growth was a computer program which predicted that there was going to be too many people on the earth and we were going to have to do something about it. And that came out of the Club of Rome. Now, the Club of Rome is what they call an elite think tank, and it's linked into what this lot, the Club of Budapest, to Irving Laszlo. And basically what they're about is they're looking at new ways and systems of global governance. So if you've got you've got this computer program called Limits to Growth that says there's too many people in the world. They then followed it up with the first global revolution. Now, the first global revolution was basically saying that there's too many people using too many resources and things are going to have to change. So in the absence of war, famine and the like, we decided that climate change would fit the bill. In other words, the enemy of humanity is humanity itself. And this leads to a new form of what they call benefice. So let's go back to the Catholic Church of the Middle Ages. They used to give benefice. In other words, you could pay the priest to absolve your sins. You could go and say your confession. You can basically pay to get out of purgatory and into heaven. Now, the new form of benefice is carbon taxation and basically the reduction of all your rights. Not flying, not driving a car. These are all benefice for you living on the earth and being a blot on it, because the Club of Rome's idea was that human beings would become the enemy of themselves. Therefore, we are a blight on the earth and we have to actually pay benefits to be here. And that will make people feel good. Now, that's called the common good. Okay, so basically, the common good means that everybody is or appears to join in with society and everything appears to be normal. That's the common good. I'll give you an example of the common good. So there's a really nasty case that the government thinks could destabilize public opinion. The judge will say it's not in the public interest. Okay, now that doesn't mean that there's no case to answer. It means that it's not in the interest of the public to know about it because it will destabilize society. So this is where people get a misunderstanding of the way their reality works. So when I see these websites that are set up by groups that are linked to the Club of Rome, this is about a globalist agenda to take over the narrative of public opinion. That's all it is. So if you know that there's a lot of people going to protest about 5G, well, what are you going to do? If you're a globalist, you need to own those people. You need to get them on board and quick. So that's what this is about. And we're not just talking about one website here, John. There are thousands of these template websites. They talk about grassroots organization. Anything that says that grassroots basically isn't. They talk about direct action. They use these terms which were given to them. These terms were given to them by people who are implementing change. And basically, we're talking about people who are agents of change. In other words, they're not going to tell you what the change is. The change is this new totalitarian system. So anybody who gets into this idea of a new paradigm, a world shift, these are new age terms that were brought in the early 70s. And you need to read books maybe like The Aquarian Conspiracy and Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow. I've done 20 odd years research into this, so I don't throw people in the deep end, but basically we're talking about, if you want to control protest, you control the protest, and that's what the state and through the UN and the people who set this up are doing. Now, the point is that you've got a bit of history here. You need to go back to the beginning, the World Wilderness Conference in 1987. The Global Environmental Facility was set up out of that, which is basically a World Conservation Bank. And it was agreed, basically, you need to look this up for yourselves. It's all online. You do a bit of research, or come to our talks, or look at some of our shows, and I outline how it works. I've actually got if you look at that article, it's called 5G Debate, Hijacked by Globalists, and it gives you some links to look at. So if you're a bit doubtful about what I'm saying, look at the links, and it's also got a video there, Enablers for Achieving Agenda 2030, and it gives you an insight into what world leaders are doing. Now, these aren't people who have been chosen to lead by the public. These are people who've been mentored into a program as leaders, very different things. So yeah, I think that's a kind of overview of it, John. Yeah.
No, that's really helpful. And, you know, you mentioned some of those keywords that are used, and things like rise up is something I hear a lot as well. You know, rising up. And of course, you've got the
Rising Up was actually an organization that was linked to Extinction Rebellion, came out of Rising Up. So see, what it is, this is completely fake, right? You've got to, anything with rebel in it is usually fake, yeah? Anything that says grassroots isn't, because these are the terms that have been hijacked. It's a bit like sustainable development. It sounds great, but it means whatever they want it to mean. And in that video, Enablers for Achieving Agenda 2030, Enrico Giovanni, who implements Agenda 2030 in Italy, which is its new totalitarian system, says, sustainable development, what does it mean? Everything and nothing. So basically, it's the hijacking of terms. So when you see these terms, they've been stripped of their meaning and they're now empty.
This is it. And it confuses people. They keep things very ambiguous, and it's very interesting. And now the founder of the worldshift.earth, she actually wrote to me, and she said she founded the original Worldshift 2012 along with Dana Amadei and Irvin Laszlo. And of course, we know that both of them were in the Club of Budapest, and Irvin Laszlo founded the Club of Budapest, and of course was part of the Club of Rome. And I just feel that people who are going to set up a platform, an international platform to incorporate all the 5G movements around the world, for me, that's really concerning. And I've always been saying to people, look, connect with people locally. We've got to do this locally. And of course, the main lady who's behind Stop5G International said to me, my way is I think globally and act locally. And of course, that's exactly
well, that's a slogan straight out of the UN.
Right.
That is a bit of a giveaway. Yeah. Think globally, act locally. Global to local is where this communitarian system actually comes into your local community. And we've been researching, I've been researching this personally for over 20 years. And I'm not asking anyone to believe anything I say. Look it up for yourself. I've done a lot of study into this. The whole point of it is that we live in a system now which is based on an idea called communitarianism, which was announced by David Cameron in 2010 when the Big Society was announced. The Big Society, people think, oh, that went into the background, didn't go anywhere. No, what happened was they set up hundreds of NGOs. In 1987, in a document called Our Common Future, which was written and produced out of a thing called the Brundtland Report by Gro Harlem Brundtland, who's the Prime Minister of Norway. And she was part of the World Socialism Congress, World Socialist Party. And basically what happened was a billionaire oil person called Maurice Strong, billionaire from the oil industry, Maurice Strong, went to the UN with this idea of carrying on this new global paradigm, which was to mentor people into this idea of anthropogenic global warming, and basically to bring the Western countries down to third world level and everything would balance out. But it doesn't actually mean that. What's happened is that it's basically a corporate infrastructure that's been put in everywhere. Everyone who lives in Britain will see how their local area has been re-engineered. thousands and thousands of new flats going up, houses everywhere, and the density of these housing is something to do with a thing called Agenda 21, which was about everybody being pushed into cities and smart cities. This is the UN Global Action Plan. They want everybody living in cities by 2050, but they're bringing it forward now. So how do you bring it forward? You get protest groups like Extinction Rebellion to protest for what? What you're going to give them. Extinction Rebellion protested for citizens' assemblies, which take matters out of the hands of our government and put them into the hands of lobbyists. Yes, citizens' assemblies are run by lobbyists. There is no scientific basis for the anthropogenic global warming as far as citizens' assemblies go. They used Miles Allen in the Oxford Citizens' Assembly on Climate Change, who's actually been proven to have lied in court in America. I don't want to get too much into the detail, but this is what we're dealing with. You're dealing with something which is untrue, disingenuous, and fronted by people who may be well-meaning, but have not a clue what they're doing.
Right. And up and down the UK now, these citizens' assemblies are getting established. And this is something, of course, I was campaigning against as an independent candidate in the general election. And I just feel it very concerning, you know, why people are just going along with this. And they're thinking, because, of course, so many people believe in this global warming hoax. They don't know what's going on with the natural cycles. They're just believing everything they're being fed from the TV. And of course, now there's this big cry for this climate emergency action plan. And what's all that about, Mark?
Well, basically, it's about a ramping up of the governance system. It's not being implemented fast enough, so let's create an emergency. It's very simple. Anybody who knows anything about weather patterns and the way that global systems of weather work will know that there can never be a climate emergency. There can be extreme climate events, certainly there can. There always have been and always will be extreme climate events, but there's never going to be a climate emergency because the systems, the weather systems and the natural systems that are going on will not allow there to be an emergency. Yes, there are extreme weather events, but these are not an emergency. So what you get is you get things like the Australian bushfires being linked to climate change. Now, of course, they're not linked to climate change. The climate changes all the time. In the late 1800s, the fires were much worse. In 1974, they burnt much more than they have this year. But this doesn't mean anything to lobbyists. Lobbyists have an agenda, and that's what we're talking about with these websites as well. They're there to push an agenda through. It doesn't always work, but what we have to remember is that we have hundreds of thousands of people who have been mentored into this as, in reality, agents. That's what they are. They're complicit with it. And if you're complicit with it, or compliant with it, then you're contributing to it. And that is a very important thing to realize, because the whole idea of this is a global system of management. Now, the point is that the people at the top think this is a good idea, but we're talking about billionaires. Are billionaires a priest class, a real priest class? No, they're not. They are not informed enough to make these decisions. However, when you get the World Bank at the back of all this with the carbon taxation, and as I said, the Global Environmental Facility set up in 1987, it was basically, this is a business plan for the world to take over all infrastructure which affects the livelihood of people. Now, people go, well, what's that got to do with me? Okay, so if you were one of the 400,000 council tenants who've now lost their house in London and are now going to be looking for affordable housing, find some affordable housing. You won't, because your flat that you've been taken out of was compulsory purchase for something about 100 odd thousand pounds if you're lucky. The new builds are 450,000. So it's clear social cleansing. So that's just one example. Now, if you go to other examples of it, how many self-employed people need vehicles? How many self-employed people had to update their diesel vans and lost thousands and thousands of pounds, putting people out of business? How many people who in reality are going to be able to use electric cars? They are not efficient and they don't go far enough. This is the point. So basically, if you don't want to live in a smart city and walk everywhere and be monitored and have the government looking at everything you're doing and not being able to earn any money on the side without it being taxed, then this is for you. This is the plan for you. If you want to be forcefully vaccinated, if you want to be monitored 24 hours a day, if you want to have power cuts, because that's where it's going, huge power cuts. That's already been told to me by people who are running the national grid, basically. We did a show called the Green Energy Agenda and what that's about. And the green agenda is nothing to do with anything green. It's about control and management of population in a very draconian way. And it's got nothing to do with environmentalism. So we're for real environmentalism. Yeah, that's a great idea. But we're not talking about an environmental project here. And that's been admitted by the people who put this out. We talk about this in our talks. I don't want to go on too much here, John, but I think we have to give a bit of context, you know. Yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, these are really important matters for people to think about here. And I'm just looking at this Stop5G International.org website. And of course, this was put together by the team that met up, the international team that got together as a result of this lady behind the worldshift.earth site, connecting several different people. And I'm just looking at it. And of course, you've got this globe here. So immediately for that rings alarm bells for me, this globalism. And the only things that they're really promoting are protests. So we've got the next protest in April. And of course, Arthur Furstenberg, I mean, I've got an email that was, he wrote where he's actually said, look, we need to actually engage with the climate change community. And, you know, climate change is a real problem. But of course, we know that they're pushing a false narrative and it's a control.
Well, also, to me, it's a red flag when anyone says community, John. What do they mean by community? What they mean by community is a consensus, a consensus reality. That's nothing to do with the community.
Right, exactly. And protests, I mean, are they really the key to change? What do you think about that? Just
no, because let's put it into context. What happens when you go on a protest? You use a certain amount of energy, okay? Now, I looked at the People's Assembly. The People's Assembly was set up by the government and people within the intelligence services, because I was working on a TV station at the time. One of these people came in. Now, he's not doing anything wrong. But what he's doing is setting up something that's safe for the public. That's in the public interest, but it's not a protest. So, People's Assembly, you get bussed into London, you get given your banners, you go out, you have a good day out, you get some worthy union leaders giving you some good rhetoric, you get useful idiots like Russell Brand up there, you get whatever useful media idiots they're promoting, you go home on your coach, you give the signs back, they all get recycled, but you're not going to change anything. That's what they mean by protest. They mean we organise and control the narrative of the protest, and we give you your banners, we give you your emblems, like they did with Extinction Rebellion. They gave them everything. And all this they went out to do was do some yoga on Westminster Bridge or lie down in Waitrose. It's not a protest. I can tell you something that I know from experience and fact, because I've looked into what happened with Occupy. Occupy was taken over by change agents using consensus, and exactly the same people are involved in Extinction Rebellion as were involved in Occupy. They're on the payroll and they're professional activists. They're not activists, they're activists. So when you see this sort of thing, World Shift is a global movement. Oh, really? Okay, come out of the Club of Budapest. They made a big mistake putting that on because it links directly to the Club of Rome. And the Club of Rome invented anthropogenic global warming with the help of a few billionaires. And that's a generalization, but it's true in essence. Okay? So, based on the transformation of awareness and behavior at the individual level, New Age speak here, based on the transformation of awareness. What transformation of awareness they're talking about? The transformation of awareness that they want to implement, which is their agenda, which is basically acquiesce, make sure that you go along with what we want you to do. Now, there's a much bigger picture here, because a lot of this came out of the New Age movement, which is all about acquiescence, and everything outside it's negative. All of this stuff is socially engineered, and I've been looking into it for 25 years. But this is a short interview. We can't go into all that stuff now. But basically, when you look at these sort of websites, I see template cookie cutter websites like this, based on the transformation of awareness. Oh yeah, there's going to be a paradigm shift. That's coming up next. And the individual level, beyond national and ethnic barriers, yeah, it's globalist, and cuts across barriers of politics and business leadership, yes, because basically with this, they want this to go above national government, which it does. Civil sector's immediate, yeah. We aim to create a better future by making a world shift declaration, yeah. It's a social movement. It's a social movement. What does that mean? Well, that's their term for something which is something that's in the public good. You're going to go out and protest. We're going to control it. We've already got the outcome. You're going to think you had a part in it, and that's going to make you feel good. But don't for a minute think you're ever going to change anything, because the change that you're going to make is the one we're going to give you. That's what they're saying on there. The World Shift are pushing the global objectives of the United Nations Agenda 2030 policies. So they're being totally disingenuous. They're a front for those policies, which are about getting you into a smart city, taking away your car, ultimately taking away your house, and then robbing you of everything you've got. That's a kind of overview of what this is about. And as we've been studying it a long time, come to our talks if you want to know more about it. It's a very simple system in some ways, but it's complex to the public because they think small and globalists think big. We all think small. We've been trained to think small. The people behind this are thinking very big and always have done. So the fact that people think that billionaires can't influence governments all over the world is an absolute joke. They do it all the time. And Maurice Strong put this into action through the United Nations. Edmund de Rothschild bankrolled it, and they came up with the Global Environmental Facility from 1987 onwards. And we are now seeing the results of the tightening of the noose around people, property, assets, and everything that affects the livelihood of people. That's what this is about.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And just a bit of good news, if you go to the worldshift.earth website, it seems like it's now been taken down. It's got here, the time has come for worldshift.earth to bow out gracefully. So
yeah, well, the thing is that I've had this experience before, and it doesn't take many people to catch on, because a lot of the people who are running these are pretty clueless, to be fair. They're not, I don't think they've got any malevolent intent. So let's make that clear. There's nothing malevolent going on with the people who are probably running this. But behind them are, they don't realize how much they're being steered and controlled, and they don't realize the outcome of what this is about. And I think a lot more people are waking up to the outcome of what it's about, because they're seeing their whole infrastructure of their country be radically changed in a very short time. And the changes that are coming are going to be unprecedented. So people have to think about that. They have to think, if they've got elderly parents in other part of the country, how are they going to get to them? This is the thing, you see. This is not about a custodial aspect of looking after people. It demonizes the elderly. It's basically about population reduction. The people who are implementing this have they're basically social Darwinists and eugenicists. And because they've got a lot of money, they're going to be all right. It's that simple. There's nothing complicated going on here. But yeah, these template websites are pretty much all the same. I've seen them time and time again. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at local housing action, whether you're looking about fracking, whether you're looking at Occupy or anything. Everything is controlled.
yeah.
So that's the point. So the only, as John says, the only way out of this is to really go local. You have to form your own local action groups. Nothing to do with the council, nothing. Don't be affiliated to any organisation, but you can support other organisations, but don't necessarily put it out that you do. I've got a mission statement that we put out, John, with all this on, how to basically avoid these things, and the Delphi technique, which is basically steering people into appearing to agree to something that they don't agree with.
Right. They separate people into groups, and then of course you have the facilitator for each groups, and they do this in the Extinction Rebellion meetings so that the conversation is directed, and if anybody raises an issue that's controversial or not acceptable, that person will be ignored or humiliated. And of course, at the Extinction Rebellion meetings, this is what I experienced. They just wouldn't address 5G. I got kicked out for trying to raise the topic of 5G. And then, of course, I recognized it when I turned up to debate in the election, when I was told, oh, we'll be split into tables after debate and you can participate then. And of course, yeah, because it's all controlled. So that's the problem. But yeah, just tell us once more, Mark, just about where you're going to be speaking. And the details for those, so people have them one more time.
Yeah, it's we're in Frome and Totnes on the weekend, and yeah, I mean, let me just give you the addresses properly. I think that'd be better. But yeah, I think in conclusion to this, that yes, you have to look at the way these things are set up. Yes, indeed, Extinction Rebellion is run on the same principles as Occupy was when it got taken over by George Soros money, and basically you can look at these organisations for what they are. They're there to control the narrative of public opinion, and the globalists need the anti-globalists to implement their policies. So the anti-globalists don't have anything to do. They want to go to protests, so the globalists organise their protests. It's that simple. There's nothing complicated. So, okay, yeah, I'll just give you these dates now, John. Yeah, 8th of Feb, the Corner House, 1 Christchurch Street, Frome, BA11 1QA. There's an Eventbrite page at winnersontheworld.net on the 9th of February, 12 till 7:30 p.m. at the Dartmouth in Totnes. There's an Eventbrite bookings page for that. Do try and go through the Eventbrite, because it's nice to know, give a rough idea how many people are coming. And also, you can pay on the day, so don't worry about that. It's only £10 for the whole day. We don't make any money out of this, and it's our little gift to you all.
I think it's great value for a whole day event, and 3 different speakers, yourself, Sandy Adams, Piers Corbin, all of who I've seen. And, I think you guys are doing great work, and we've really got to raise awareness here. And thank you so much for coming on my show today, Mark.
Thanks, John. I know you didn't get a word in edgeways, but I had a lot to say.
Thank you.
Cheers. See you then.